After a long day of cleaning, Mary Warren leaves the Proctor's farm. Mary, a 17-year-old girl, worked for John and Elizabeth Proctor. She was a rather subservient person. Working for the Proctors was the best job for someone like her. She was treated well by Elizabeth and her children. Elizabeth rarely raised her voice at her. Maybe it was because she was hurt too much for her to be angry at others. Not long ago, John Proctor had an affair with Mary's friend Abigail. After the affair, Mary was treated much differently by John. He became very hostile with her. Mary was afraid of him and tried her best to keep John happy. However, every now and then he would unleash all his anger at her. Mary continued to walk away from the old farm. She enjoyed these quiet walks. These walks gave Mary calmness in her lonely, fearful life. She had traveled into the heart of the village. There were much more people outside than there normally were. A sense of wrongdoing filled the streets of the village. As Mary walked towards a group of people, she began to hear the news that had shocked the entire town. "They should hang," a man said. "No witch should be able to walk in this country." The rest of the people nodded in agreement with the man. Mary was confused by this. There had never been any reports of witchcraft in Salem before. "I cannot believe that Reverend Parris would be so blind to let the devil enter his home. That whole family should burn," an old lady said. Suddenly, Mary was frozen. She had witnessed this witchcraft. Her thoughts go back to when she saw them in the forest. Betty Parris and Abigail Williams dancing as their slave Tituba sung a strange song while Mercy Lewis ran around naked in the woods. It was definitely something frightening to watch. The last thing Mary remembered was Reverend Parris leaping out of the bushes. As soon as she saw that, Mary ran away. "I knew there was something wrong about that girl Abigail. Now I know that she is the devil's servant," one person said. The people in the town were angry. Mary quickly ran to Reverend Parris's house to find Abigail. She could not let her friend be treated like this. Mary felt anxious as she sat in the court. She was sitting next to Abigail and watched the proceedings take place. The judge was a man named Hawthorne, and next to him sat the Deputy Governor Danforth, Reverend Parris, and Reverend Hale. Soon the court began the proceedings. One by one, each woman would come up for the trial. Mary had originally thought that there would only be a few, but she saw much more women accused for witchcraft. Mary began to count them all. 39. 39 women were accused of witchcraft, many by Abigail alone. Mary was shocked when she saw that Goody Osborne and Sarah Good were even accused. The court was turning cold, and seeing how many women were accused made Mary's stomach turn. When each woman would go up for the proceedings, Abigail and the girls would hiss and scream at them. Everyone in that room was acting strange. Mary was not sure what to do, so she began hissing and screaming with Abigail and the rest of the girls. She was confused as to why they would even do this. Abigail had told her that this was all just sport. To get her mind off of all this chaos, Mary would knit a poppet. "What's that?" Abigail asked. "It's just a little poppet. I figure I'd make one for Goody Proctor. She was feeling a little ill when I left her," Mary replied. Abigail gave her a mischievous look. "Well, don't let me stop you, Mary," Abigail said. Mary continued to work on her poppet. Soon the proceedings began to shock Mary. The other girls were still screaming. All of a sudden, Mary began to have cold sweats. The room began to spin around her. Then she saw a blurry figure standing in front of her. She could still hear Abigail screaming. "Goody Osborne, please don't send your spirit onto us," said Abigail. Although she knew this was all fake, the experience felt almost real. Right then, Mary fainted. She woke up a few minutes later to see most of the women in chains. "Let everyone know that these women are Salem's evil spirits. They all will hang," said Judge Hawthorne. Mary felt even more ill. She left the court as fast as she could. She needed to go back to the Proctors. While she was leaving, she heard Abigail mention Elizabeth Proctor's name to Judge Hawthorne. She needed to go see Elizabeth and John right away. John Proctor held onto Mary's arm as him and Giles Corey headed to the court. Mary, looking down the whole time, felt as though she might just collapse right there. Her head was racing with the events that happened at John Proctor's house. How could Abigail accuse Elizabeth like that? Was she that desperate for John's attention, she thought? She had also grown a larger fear for John Proctor. She was always afraid of him, but now she saw just how terrifying he could be when Elizabeth was taken away from him. Mary wanted to run away from John's grip. Images flashed into her mind of when John nearly strangled her, forcing her to come to the court. She never knew that he could be so violent. Although John meant good, he still made Mary a victim of his wrath. The three of them finally arrived at the courthouse. Giles opened the door for them. Mary looked down and did not move. "Come on now, today we go to tell the truth," said Giles. John tugged on Mary's arm. As they entered the courthouse, everyone in the court stared at them. Mary kept her gaze down. She felt as though the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She was nauseous and barely able to carry herself. That day she would have to face the court, John, and Abigail. Abigail stared directly at Mary with a furious look. John Proctor had just accused Abigail and the girls for lying to the court and was using Mary as proof. Mary turned away from Abigail. She knew as soon as she stepped into the court that she had lost Abigail's friendship, one of the only friends she had. Deputy Governor Danforth was doing most of the questioning. When he asked her why she lied in court, she told Danforth that it was all pretense. She was frightened. Lying in court was a crime. The room was slowly spinning around Mary, and she was barely able to breathe. An argument broke out in court as Giles Corey accused Thomas Putnam for purchasing the land of those accused of witchcraft. The court did not believe Giles at all. As Giles yelled, "He means to hang us all." Mary is reminded of the reality of the situation. She begins to sob. This court is biased, and she is being forced to go up against it. John tries to calm her down as he hands Danforth Mary's deposition. Barely able to control herself, Mary went back into questioning with Danforth. "Has Mr. Proctor threatened you for this deposition?" asked Danforth. "No, sir," Mary replied. She lied. Mary remembers John gripping her throat, forcing her to do this. After further questioning, Danforth begins to question Abigail. Abigail painted herself as the victim. I know not. A cold wind has come," Abigail says as she looked at Mary. Soon all the other girls do the same. "Abby, don't do that," yells Mary. To Mary's surprise, John confesses that he had an affair with Abigail. After bringing in Elizabeth to question John's lechery accusation, Abigail continues to blame Mary of witchcraft. The girls watch, a bird above them. Her wings are spreading. "Mary, please, don't, says Abigail. Proctor tries to calm Mary yet again, but this time Mary runs away from him. Don't touch me, Mary screams. A clearly astonished John Proctor looks at her. There's only one way to survive now. Mary reflects upon the pain John has sent to her. "You're the devil's man," says Mary, as she points to John. There's no turning back for her now. "My name. He want my name. I'll murder you," he says, "if my wife hangs." "We must go and overthrow the court," he says, Mary claims. Seeing as she has convinced the court, Mary runs over to Abigail. Abby, I'll never hurt you more," she says, as Abigail reaches out to embrace Mary. A sobbing Mary holds on to Abigail. "I had to," she thinks to herself. She watches the entire court turn chaotic. "I'm sorry, John." "I had no choice," she says under her breath as John Proctor laughs insanely.